I'm going to be reading chapter 41 of Zero Day. Voices echoing in the hallway outside Addie's room awakened her from a deep sleep. The shades were still drawn, but Addie could see pale light slanting in from the tall windows. It must be morning. Early. She'd heard a soft rap on her bedroom door, and the handle twisted slowly open. "Addie?" her mother whispered. "Are you awake?" Addie stayed still, pretending to be asleep. Her head was pounding, and she didn't feel like getting up. She listened as her mother clicked the door shut and started talking to someone just outside. "No," she said, "she's not up. Do you think I should wake her?" A slight pause. The president's voice answered, "No, let her sleep. But make sure to get her up soon. I want to make sure we see her first, before the news." Addie's heart began to thump, and her palms grew cold and clammy. Had someone heard her sneak up to the game room? She thought she'd been so careful. Wait, news? Addie held her breath and listened, but the hallway had grown quiet. She waited a beat and then crept from bed, grabbed her computer, and slipped back under the covers. She flipped the screen open and with trembling fingers launched the browser, hoping to figure out what her parents were talking about. What she found made her heart seize up in her chest. A breaking news item flashed red across her home page. Alert. Standoff at West Virginia compound of David and Helene Brown enters 5th hour. Addie clicked on the link and a video screen popped open. A young reporter, blonde hair and a ponytail, stood at the edge of a dirt road holding a microphone. Helicopters circled above her head, causing her blue windbreaker to ripple. It was barely daylight, the sky an eerie blue-gray. Addie notched up the volume. "We're here live at the West Virginia compound owned by David and Helene Brown, where an intense standoff has been underway since just after midnight. According to our sources, the Browns are believed to be affiliated with a fringe, neo-conservative political group known as Judgment Day. No official word yet why the FBI descended on this remote property in the middle of the night, but anonymous sources have told CNN that the raid may be connected to the Adele Webster kidnapping." Addie's head went from pounding to dizzy. She gripped the edges of the computer and took small, shallow breaths. The reporter continued. "While we wait for new developments, let's go back to Brian in the studio for a look at what Judgment Day is and why its members may have drawn federal interest." The reporter's face shrank to a small rectangle in the corner of the screen, which was then filled by a dark-haired man sitting at an anchor's desk. "Thank you, Amy," he said. He turned and looked directly into the camera. A graphic appeared behind him, the scales of justice. But in place of a blindfold, Lady Justice had a tattered American flag wrapped around her eyes. In place of a sword, she gripped an automatic rifle. The words Judgment Day were scrawled in blood red across the image. "Here's what we know," the news anchor continued. "This is a radical conservative group that traces its origins to the aftermath of the 1995 Oklahoma City bombings. The group formed in response to what it saw as a conspiracy to cover up what they believed was the true mastermind behind the attack, the U.S. government itself." The image behind the anchor switched to side-by-side pictures of a middle-aged man and woman. The man's head was shaved, but he had a long beard. The woman had dirty blonde hair pulled into a severe ponytail. She wore no makeup and had a stern look on her face. Addie recoiled from the screen, heart racing. The anchor continued. "Formerly led by David and Helene Brown, Judgment Day garnered 100 or so followers in its early years, but dwindled to just a handful of widely distributed supporters in the last decade. The Browns live here with their 3 children." The image then switched again to a live aerial shot of a secluded compound surrounded by trees and a tall metal fence. Addie began to grow nauseous. "They are living almost entirely off the grid here," the anchor said. "No connection to municipal water, sewage, or electrical utilities. They raise their own livestock, grow their own produce. Sources say they are believed to be stockpiling weapons and survival gear. But no one really knows the Browns. Even in this rural town where people pride themselves On their live and let live attitude, the Browns are seen as loners and outsiders, only coming out of their compound to stock up on supplies at the local feed and grain store. The news anchor's face froze, and he put his hand to his ear. "We have breaking situation at the Brown compound," he said. "We have reports of shots fired. The FBI is moving in. Let's return to Amy on the scene." The corner screen then enlarged, and the blonde reporter returned, glancing behind her shoulder and back at the camera, hand on her earpiece. "That's right, Brian," she said. "We are hearing shots fired from somewhere in the compound. No word if it's the Browns or the FBI." A flurry of activity erupted somewhere off camera. The reporter began to run, still talking and breathing heavily into her microphone. "We're being asked to push back," she said. "Brian, can you switch to the chopper for a better view of what's happening on the ground?" Once again, the screen changed, an aerial view of the compound. In the center was a rectangular shape of a house, surrounded by a field and a fence. Black figures moved in from the edges, so small they looked like toy soldiers. Suddenly, the flash of a muzzle lit up from the house, followed by another. Brian began to narrate breathlessly. "Confirmed. We do have shots fired," he said. "They appear to be coming from inside the house. I repeat, shots are being fired from inside the house." "That's right," Amy's voice interjected. "We can hear the FBI. They're yelling over their loudspeakers for the Browns to drop their weapons and surrender." And then there was a moment of silence. A smoky substance billowed from the house. "It appears the FBI has shot tear gas into the building," Brian said, "but they are approaching with caution as there are reports of children in the house." The chopper circled back for a tighter shot. On screen, the house's front door swung open. Two figures ran out into the front yard, guns blazing. The surrounding black figures' weapons lit up like a string of flashing Christmas lights, and the couple at the center fell to the ground. And then the news feed cut out.